Good morning, everybody. I just got home from a life-changing walk, and I wanted to share with you what happened on the walk. I've been thinking and reading and writing a lot lately post-election about how I can contribute to a sense of unity and community in a time when our country feels full of hurting hearts and divergent views. And so the idea that I was focusing on my walk today was vulnerability. And I read a lot about how important being vulnerable is for all of us, for connecting to other people, especially for connecting to people that are different than us, that hold different views than us, that, people say you have to start with vulnerability. So I was thinking as I was walking, it's a great idea to be vulnerable. The only problem is that's really hard to do, especially because so many of us have spent our lives, especially people that have gone through trauma, of which studies show is at least 70% of adults, so many, many people, have spent their lives not being vulnerable because of survival, right? So there's a reason to build thick skin if it helps you survive. But as Mia Mackenzie, the author, writes, surviving and being free, or surviving and getting free, is a different journey altogether. And so what I started thinking about is if we want to be vulnerable, it's not just a matter of being vulnerable, it's a matter of recognizing what our default settings are and unlearning things we've spent our whole lives learning. So the question I started thinking to myself and that I want to ask you is, when you examine yourself, your habits, your behaviors, your responses to things, what do you need to unlearn going forward? And perhaps your goal isn't to be an activist, perhaps your goal isn't to work towards community, but I think it's an important question for every adult, no matter where we are, depending on what our goal is, to realize that we have default settings that we operate from. And sometimes those default settings were developed for reasons, and sometimes they're applicable, but sometimes they're not helpful for the goal that we're trying to have. And so today I was thinking about it and I said, okay, practicing vulnerability. And I just had this great idea and it came to me and it changed everything for me. So this is my music player and I was listening to music and I had this idea and I said, I'm gonna sing out loud as I walk. And I said, it feels kind of weird, everyone's rushing to work. But I said, I'm gonna sing out loud when I walk, not super loud, I'm not trying to put on a performance, but just making sure that my voice was audible. And even just that little step felt so vulnerable. And in the beginning, I felt myself getting quiet when someone would walk by me. And then I said, Abby, the whole point of doing this is I had a feeling I was doing something related to vulnerability. The whole point of doing this is so that people can hear you in this small, safe way. It felt like the scariest thing I could do in a way that I still felt safe. And pretty soon I started shaking my shoulders or, moving my hands to the beat. And it was just this wonderful experience where I felt outside my comfort zone, but it was small enough and it was with strangers. I literally was walking by them. I wasn't even, a stranger in front of an audience I would never see before. I was a stranger in front of someone I saw for half a second before we passed by each other. And it was so cool because as it was happening, I walked for about an hour, I felt something shift. I felt like I was practicing being vulnerable, and the response I got from people was amazing. People smiled, people laughed, people said, have a great day. And it reminded me of what Rabbi Arthur Green writes about in his book, Radical Judaism. He describes sacred moments as the moments when the ordinariness of life falls away. So the idea is that the ordinary can become something sacred. It can become something, we can see it anew. And so last thing I'll say is if this feels vulnerable and scary, it should be. But I listened to an interview yesterday by Bill Burr, the comedian Bill Burr, and he was describing how one time he'd had a show at a loud bar late one night, and he was going on right before Jerry Seinfeld was going to go on. And he said that his act was full of, curse words and kind of explicit material. And as he was walking off the stage, he apologized to Jerry Seinfeld because he knew that Jerry's act was clean, and he felt like he kind of primed this late night crowd for a crude comedy act. And so Jerry said something to him. He said, I'm going to paraphrase, but he said, I don't care. I don't care if this audience responds well to my material because I'm practicing for the Tonight Show. So what he was saying is his ultimate goal wasn't that audience in the bar that night. He was there because he was going to practice because he had a greater goal in mind. So they could not like him, they could boo him. He was going to get practice with his material that night. That was his only goal. So I was thinking about that as I was walking. I think that's applicable here to us as well, in the sense that you're going to feel uncomfortable, but tell yourself that this is not about the people you walk by on the street that you see for half a second. It doesn't matter if they judge you. It doesn't matter if they think you're crazy. It doesn't matter what their response is, because your goal, our goal, is about cultivating character. Our goal is to learn how to be more vulnerable in a slow and deep way that takes daily practice. So Jerry had his eyes on the Tonight Show, and hopefully we have our eyes on cultivating character. And if along the way people respond in a way that isn't helpful to us, it helped me at least to keep my eye on the greater prize, which was the fact that I was trying to develop character. So I wanted to offer that as a practice, as a spiritual practice, as a meditation. If you're someone who's been thinking about vulnerability and how to be more vulnerable and wondering how do you tangibilize, if that's a word, how do you tangibilize the idea of being vulnerable, take your music player and go for a walk and just try to sing. Again, not super loud, not ostentatiously, but just try to sing and let yourself feel the joy that comes along with that. And when you get to a red light, stop and dance a little.